The senator from Oklahoma.
Thank you. I have to tell you, this is a complicated issue as we walk through the issues of immigration, and there are a lot of questions that hang out there. Secretary Ally Mayorkas was in front of our committee on May the 13th to be able to walk through the issues that we're facing. Just as a quick review, we had a record number of people illegally cross our border in March. That record was beaten in April, that was beaten in May, that was beaten in June, that was beaten in July. In July, we had 210,000 people illegally cross our border that we know of. DHS in a recent court filing actually filed in a court filing where they made this statement: based on current trends, the department expects that total encounters this fiscal year are likely to be the highest ever recorded. The department also expects that these numbers will climb even higher if the CDC order Title 42 is enjoined. There's a real issue that's going on. And so when Ally Mayorkas was in front of our committee has direct jurisdiction for oversight of what's happening in Homeland Security. There have been a lot of changes that have been done this year in how we're enforcing or not enforcing the border. We have record numbers of individuals crossing the border wall and that whole infrastructure, as well as the technology on our southern border. All the construction has stopped on that. The best we can tell, we've spent $2 billion this year not building the wall. Currently, it's not getting better. It continues to be able to get worse. We have 10,000 migrants in the Rio Grande Valley currently being held right now. That is 783% over capacity in the Rio Grande Valley right now. And on the interior enforcement side with ICE, we have 6,000 ICE agents. And the last number that we saw last month, they did 3,000 deportations among 6,000 ICE agents in a month. The standard for them to actually interdict, detain, or deport an individual has now reached such a high standard that they have to contact regional leadership and ask permission by name to be able to interdict someone. That has dramatically slowed down what is happening in interior enforcement, what's happening in our border area, and as we continue to be able to watch the number of individuals cross our border that are COVID positive, we have this odd situation where the nation and the president is talking to companies and telling companies, you need to mandate vaccines and you need to mandate masks, when at the whole time we're literally bringing people from all over the world across our southern border and releasing them into the United States. We have legitimate questions that need to be answered. May the 13th, when Ally Mayorkas was in front of our committees, there were multiple questions that I had. It was a very cordial interchange and very frank going through the issues. I asked some very specific questions for specific numbers. He said, I'll follow up with that. We wrote him a list of questions and asked for specific answers for that. To their credit, 2 months later, we got a list of answers to the questions that I had asked. That was 24 hours ago. It's a very specific answer on the issues I asked about the volunteer force from DHS. The humanitarian exceptions to Title 42, including the policy documents, they were very commendable on how they actually answered those. DHS, I'd asked specific questions on how they're handling sex offenders because ICE agents have told me over and over again, sex offenders are not being interdicted in the numbers they were in the past. They gave us very specific answers on that. But the problem was half of the questions they gave us answers to and half of it they did not. For instance, we asked about the study that they started January the 20th on the border wall. That study was supposed to be 60 days. It's now been more than 200 days. We just asked for the status of that study and if we could see any of it, what were the findings. Instead, I was sent a press release that they had put out. That is not what I need. In fact, that press release was copied in multiple places in the document to say this is responsive. That's not responsive. There's a new process that's been put in place by this DHS called notice to report, where literally if there's a large number of people crossing the border at once, they're taking those individuals out, doing biometrics and a background check, and then releasing them in the country with the statement of turn yourself in at an ICE office somewhere in the country. No administration's ever done that. As far as we can tell, 55,000 people this year have been released into the country under a notice to report. That is a new process that is undefined. The questions that we asked about that were completely unresponsive. The Supreme Court made a decision on what's called a notice to appear just this year that should change the process from how DHS handles notice to appear. We asked very specific questions on how DHS is handling this issue based on the Supreme Court decision that was made a few months ago. They were completely unresponsive on that. We asked about cost analysis for the border construction, what's happening on eminent domain in those issues in areas where they're choosing not to do eminent domain. They were completely non-responsive on that. So literally, half our questions they answered completely, half our questions they sent us fluff. I am the only one that's holding this up, I'm very aware. But it's also my committee of jurisdiction that specifically has border management. I am the one that is supposed to ask these questions, and I'm asking these questions. And they're not unreasonable questions. We're just asking to be able to get an answer to the question so we can figure out what is the process and what's happening. As recently as today, I learned that ICE is currently looking at a facility in western Oklahoma to do what they're calling a surge overflow temporary facility. That surge overflow temporary facility they're looking to open in western Oklahoma to move people from the border, process them in western Oklahoma, and then release them from western Oklahoma. It is not an unfair question for me to ask, what is this facility? What is its purpose? And will individuals that are not legally present in the country be released in western Oklahoma? This is the same question that's been asked by mayors and leaders in Arizona that have had a facility like this in Arizona where processing was done there and then they were released from there, and mayors and individuals there have asked the question, why are individuals that are not legally present in the country being brought from the border to my town and then released in my town? It's not unfair for me to be able to ask that as well. I have already had that conversation with the Secretary of DHS. I do not have an answer. So yes, I object, because we need to get some straightforward answers to some very straightforward, very fair questions. I object.